Much of what we experience in relationships is never spoken aloud. It happens in quiet moments, in subtle reactions, in the shifts we feel more than we hear. The ancient Stoics believed that truth rarely reveals itself through dramatic words. Instead, it shows up in behavior, in emotional patterns, and in how we respond when something we value suddenly disappears. And in the realm of attraction, this truth becomes especially clear. Many people focus only on what someone says, but words are often the least reliable indicator of genuine emotion. If you want to understand what someone truly feels, you must observe what changes when your energy, your attention, and your presence are no longer available. Today, we're going to explore a calm, psychological, stoic perspective on a familiar situation. What unfolds internally when you stop chasing someone who took you for granted? Not through anger, not through games, not through manipulation, but through grounded self respect. This is not about punishing someone, it's about understanding the natural emotional progression that occurs when a person who expected your attention suddenly loses access to it. There are three stages, and once you understand them, you'll begin to see human behavior through a completely different lens. Let's begin. Stage 1: Shock and disbelief. When someone becomes accustomed to receiving your time, your interest, and your emotional investment, they begin to assume it will always be there. Not necessarily out of arrogance, often out of simple familiarity. We all grow used to patterns, and when a pattern breaks unexpectedly, it creates a jolt. So when you stop overextending, when you no longer reach out first, when you no longer carry the emotional weight of the connection, they feel it immediately. At first, the reaction is subtle. They may assume it's temporary. They may believe you're simply busy, distracted, or preoccupied. But when the silence continues, something deeper begins to shift inside them. The Stoics often wrote that humans are most unsettled not by events, but by their interpretations of them. When your absence disrupts their expectations, their mind begins searching for explanations. They might scroll through your social media. They might send a simple "hey" just to test your response. They might like a photo or react to a story, hoping you'll break the silence. None of this is necessarily manipulative, it is instinctual. It is the mind saying, "This feels unfamiliar. I need reassurance." But when you don't respond impulsively, when you stay grounded, when you maintain your emotional center, the first layer of disbelief begins to crack, and underneath it lies something much more uncomfortable: the realization that the dynamic has changed and they no longer control the rhythm of the connection. This brings us to stage 2. Stage 2: Self-reflection and unsettled emotions. When the initial shock fades and you still haven't returned to old patterns, a deeper internal process begins. This is usually the longest and most revealing stage. Here's what happens psychologically. People rarely question their value when they feel constantly chosen. But when that assurance disappears, they're confronted with a feeling most humans avoid: self-doubt. Not dramatic self-blame, not desperation, just a quiet, persistent wondering. Why did the dynamic change? Did I stop appreciating them? Did I misread the situation? Was I taking their presence for granted? These questions emerge not because someone is weak, but because they are human. Because we often recognize the significance of something only after it stops being freely given. And for many people, space becomes a mirror that reflects back behaviors they ignored, minimized, or justified. They may start thinking more about how they interacted with you. They might replay old conversations. They might notice moments when they were dismissive or distant. And slowly, a shift happens internally. Not regret in a dramatic sense, but a deeper emotional awakening. The awareness that someone who once invested in them is now entirely at peace without their attention. This awareness can stir feelings of longing, curiosity, or even jealousy. not because you've done anything manipulative, but because you are no longer predictable. The Stoics taught that attachment is formed through meaning, not possession. And when your absence introduces uncertainty, the meaning they once overlooked becomes much more visible. This is why, during this phase, you often see people start to reappear in subtle ways. A message with no real purpose, a comment on your photo, a mention of an inside joke, a gentle attempt to re-establish connection, not out of control, but out of introspection. They are trying to understand where they stand, and this internal shift leads to the final stage, the most complex, the most emotional, and the most revealing. Stage 3: Rationalization, Reactions, and Realignment. This stage can unfold in many ways, depending on the person's emotional maturity. After experiencing self reflection, after noticing that you are no longer bound to the old dynamic, the mind tries to regain equilibrium. One way is through rationalization. Instead of facing the discomfort of losing influence, the mind may attempt to reinterpret the story. He must be busy. He probably needed space. It's better this way. I'm fine with it. Sometimes these rationalizations are healthy. They're a way to cope with emotional imbalance. But other times, they are defenses used to avoid deeper truths, such as maybe they undervalued the connection, maybe they assumed you would always be there, maybe they misunderstood your worth. Then, there's another common reaction, redirecting energy into someone new. This isn't always malicious. Often, it's an attempt to avoid sitting with uncomfortable emotions, but psychology consistently shows that when someone jumps quickly into a new connection, it is often done to soothe an emotional void, not because a deeper bond has already formed. It provides temporary comfort, but rarely long-lasting fulfillment, because eventually, after the distractions fade, after the surface excitement settles, they return to the same unresolved realization. They lost someone who valued them in a way they were not prepared to reciprocate. And that recognition often hits quietly, not loudly. Usually at night, usually when the phone stays silent, usually in moments when life slows down. This is when they begin thinking about you again. Not the old dynamic, not the attention you used to give, but the calm strength you showed by walking away with dignity. And here is the deepest truth. People do not always miss you. They often miss the version of themselves they felt they could be around you. Your presence created space for them to feel admired, valued, and emotionally held. Your absence now forces them to confront the parts of themselves they ignored. This realization stays with them far longer than any conversation could. The Stoic lesson, walking away, is not about winning, it's about returning to yourself. None of this process is about manipulation. It is not about punishing someone or trying to make them regret anything. It is about self-respect. The Stoics taught that a person's greatest power is control over their own actions, not the reactions of others. When you stop chasing someone who didn't meet you halfway, you are not abandoning them. You are returning to your own center. You are choosing peace over anxiety, clarity over confusion, and dignity over self-sacrifice. And ironically, that calm strength is what others feel most deeply. Not the silence, not the distance, but the self-possession. The quiet certainty of a person who no longer needs validation to feel whole. And that, more than anything, is what stays with them. If you've made it here, it means you're ready to see relationships through a clearer lens. Not through fear, not through ego, not through power struggles, but through understanding. The truth is simple. When you choose yourself, others feel it. When you reclaim your emotional balance, others recognize it. And when you walk away with self-respect, you don't just change the dynamic, you change the story entirely. So let this be your reminder. You do not need to chase. You do not need to cling. You do not need to convince anyone of your value. Your presence is your power. Your calm is your strength. your dignity is your foundation. And the moment you embrace that, you stop losing yourself in others and finally begin to find peace within yourself.